Hey yo, it's me again. We're back with another one. Watch this.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kylie. I'm
So,
15 years old. Since early childhood, I've been called a special child. When I was a little girl, I realized I saw things that other children didn't see. I was afraid of crosswalks and stairs. Yellow and red colors just terrified me. I would always have a
Mm,
panic attack when I saw traffic lights.
mm.
All the other kids thought I was crazy, and even their parents told them to stay away from me. I thought my mom was always very loving and supportive. I knew I was different from other people and couldn't find the answer for why. But after a lot of medical research and what seemed like millions of talks with psychiatrists, I was finally given the name of my condition, schizophrenia. Of course, I didn't understand what that meant at the time, but I saw that it absolutely devastated both of my parents. This diagnosis turned my whole life upside down. I had to take tons of pills every day, which made me sleepy, and it was hard for me to even articulate things. I turned into a vegetable, but doctors seemed to be really satisfied with my so-called positive dynamics. I know this situation was very challenging for my parents, too, especially for my father. He had his own view of life and just refused to accept the fact that his daughter could possibly be not right in the head. He would blame everyone and everything around him, and went as far as to claim that it was all my mother's bad genes. He wouldn't look me in the eyes and tried to pretend I wasn't there. That's the way we lived until one morning when I found my mom lying on the floor in the bathroom. The cause of death was a hemorrhagic stroke, but the actual reason for that was me. 8 years had passed since the diagnosis had been established, and those years were a real torture for her. I was absolutely broken and dejected. When my father said he was going to send me to a boarding school far, far away from home so that he never had to lay eyes on me again, I was sure I deserved it. He had me make a promise that I would follow my medical prescriptions and keep on taking my pills regularly. Even though I was aware that students with slight mental disorders were allowed to attend that school, I was scared to death. I was afraid to be misunderstood and to not be accepted again. But this was one time when I was glad to be mistaken. The first person I met was my roommate, Daniela. She was so nice and friendly that we kind of bonded right away. We went to different classes, but we would spend all of our free time together. We had the same interests, and she also disliked red and yellow colors. When I confessed to her that I was schizophrenic, she smiled and said, "We all have our quirks, right?" My mom always used to tell me that. I was as happy as I could possibly be. I had a real friend now. I could tell her everything I had on my mind. I also told her about my father. I think I completely cried my eyes out. Daniela was outraged when she heard my story. She started to try to persuade me that I was more normal than anybody she had ever met before. She insisted that I stop taking my pills, which were actually killing me. She also said I had to write a message to my father and to tell him what I really thought and felt. But I would never have had the heart to do that under any circumstances. One day I got a call from my father, which was very unusual. I thought he had forgotten about my existence as soon as he had gotten rid of me. But before I had a chance to say hello, he started yelling at me and threatening that he would not pay for my education anymore and disown me. I was so scared I could not move, and in addition, I didn't have the slightest idea of what on earth I had done wrong to make him so furious.
Me
But then
either.
I found a strange message on my phone. It was sent to my father, but I did not text him. I just froze in horror when I read it. It said that my dad was an unworthy and narrow-minded person, and that he had no right to treat me that way. It actually reflected what I really thought, but it was definitely not me who wrote it. It could only have been one person.
Daniela.
Found Daniela in our room. She innocently looked at me as if nothing had happened. I demanded that that she tell me the truth about the message. She didn't even try to deny it, and she said she had done it for my own good. But what was good about it if my father disowned me for real? Where would I go? I burst into tears, but suddenly Daniela said coldly, "You're just a coward, aren't you?" That was the most offensive and painful thing I had ever heard. Maybe it was because I knew she was right. We didn't talk anymore. I didn't actually see her for a while after that day. Daniela didn't even come back to sleep in our room anymore, and I had no idea where she had gone. I missed her badly. I was all alone against the world now. I would meander around the hallways, hoping she would show up, but someone else showed up. His name was Brody. He was in my class, but we hadn't talked much before. I didn't have any close friends there, but that was what we had in common. He preferred reading books or walking all alone more than hanging out with our classmates. So this is how our two like-minded souls bumped into each other in the schoolyard. He tried to make conversation with me several times, but I was not used to getting attention from boys. I was so embarrassed I could barely bring myself to say anything. And once he texted me and asked me out. I was at a loss and couldn't do anything but just keep staring at the screen of my phone. Suddenly I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Picked up a guy already?" It was Daniela. I was so happy to see her again. We talked and shared our stories like nothing had changed. Daniela helped me answer Brody's messages and gave me advice about how to behave with him. And it was really helpful. We got closer and we would go for walks holding hands, talking about everything in the world. But I still didn't tell him about my disease. Everything was back to normal until it happened. Sometimes I would occasionally forget one of my textbooks in my room, so I'd have to go back there to pick it up. I opened the door and seized up. Daniela and Brody were standing in the middle of the room and kissing. That lying witch! I was so furious I could not breathe. I rushed to Daniela and tried to grab her hair, but she dodged my hand and ran out of the room. I immediately ran after her. I was running like hell and didn't even notice that I had left the school grounds. I had lost Daniela's tracks and stopped to take a breath. I found myself standing in the deep forest. How long was I running? After hours of walking around in the trees, I realized I couldn't find my way back home. I didn't know where Daniela was. She was probably lost too. I called out her name so many times, but there was no answer. It was getting dark and I didn't know what to do. I was lost and exhausted. I didn't have my phone with me, so I couldn't even call anyone or ask for help. Finally, I just collapsed on the ground under the trees and fell asleep. I woke up early in the morning because I heard a voice calling me. I was sure it was Daniela's voice. I opened my eyes, but there was no one there. I jumped to my feet and heard the voice again. I followed it, but I still could not see my friend. Suddenly, I saw the school roof. I had made it out of the forest, but I still could not see Daniela anywhere, and I could not hear her voice anymore. She helped me to escape, but how? When I got back to school, everybody had been frantically looking for me. I saw Brody, who came up to me and attacked me with questions, but he was a traitor. I didn't say a word to him. And then he said he couldn't stand my weirdness anymore. One day I was one person, another day I was a completely different person. And what on earth made me run out of the room that day? I was so outraged. Did he really not know why? I was about to answer him back when I found
Liberty, 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 liberty.
myself surrounded by other students and teachers. They were all pointing fingers at me. I was immediately brought to the principal's office. The principal was very polite to me, but he said everybody was really worried. He said they had to call my father and that he was on his way to school. They searched the woods because Brody said I had run away so fast that he couldn't manage to catch up with me. But believe it or not, I didn't care at all. I was not afraid of my father coming or of my possible expulsion from school. I only had one thought on my mind. I burst into tears. and told the principal the whole story. I didn't run away alone. I told him about my fight with Daniela, and that it was me who made her run away, and that she had also been lost. She was still out there in the forest, or God knows where. We had to do everything we could to find her. The principal looked very confused. He said that Brody had claimed there had only been 2 of us in the room. Oh, of course he would say that. That sneaky coward. I started to shout, trying to prove that he was lying. I said he came into our room and kissed my roommate, Daniela. The principal just sat still for a while. Then he gave me a sympathetic look and said, "Kylie, you don't have a roommate, and you never have had one. Children with your health status are usually allowed to have separate rooms in our school. I have to tell you, it took me years to finally believe and realize there was no Daniela. My only best friend who loved me and took care of me, who wrote a message to my father to back me up, and who taught me how to handle guys. It was also not her who kissed Brody in the room and helped me to escape from the forest. It has always been me, just me, from the very beginning. I know Daniela is not real, and I have never seen her again, but I can hear her voice in my head from time to time. Oh, how I wish she could just still live somewhere in that forest, and that she was waiting for me. But sometimes it's extremely hard to accept reality the way it is, especially if you have schizophrenia. Have you ever confused a dream with real life? What made you realize you were wrong? I would love to know what you think of my story.
That was a good story, y'all. Make sure y'all like, comment, subscribe, and out this bitch, you hear me? Go on.